I didn't think saying yes to a weekend hike would change anything between us, but a part of me hoped it might. It wasn't like this was our first trip together. Evan and I had been doing things like this since freshman year of college road trips. Beach weekends, late-night drives with no real destination. He was the kind of friend who made the world feel bigger, like you could breathe easier when he was around. Still, something felt different this time. Or maybe the difference was me. Maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't feel more. The plan was simple. Hike a moderate trail in the Barkers. Spend the night at a lean-to near the summit and be back down by Sunday afternoon. He'd texted me 2 days earlier. "You free this weekend?" I found this sick trail reel, quiet, barely anyone around. That last line stuck with me. Barely anyone around. Like a secret trying to slip out. We left early Saturday morning, his old Jeep groaning as it wound up the narrow mountain road. The windows were down. Evan kept tapping the steering wheel to a playlist he'd refused to admit he curated himself, half indie rock, half nostalgic hits from our high school days. I stole a glance at him. He mouthed along to an old Arctic Monkeys song, hair tousled by the wind, the faintest hint of stubble along his jaw. I looked away before he could catch me. "Still can't believe you agreed to this," he said, glancing at me with that grin he always wore when he was teasing, pushing my limits. "You hiking? Sleeping outside? I thought your idea of roughing it was a hotel without room service." I rolled my eyes but smiled. "I like nature. Just filtered through a screen and maybe a glass window." He laughed, and the sound settled somewhere deep in my chest. I wished I could bottle that laugh. Keep it close. The further we drove, the more the air changed. Cooler, crisper. Scented with pine and something earthy I couldn't name. Evan talked most of the way, and I let him. I liked the way he filled the silences, never needing to ask if I was okay. I wasn't, not really, but around him. It almost didn't matter. At the trailhead, we unloaded our gear. I caught him double-checking my straps before we set off. "You sure you packed light?" he asked, tightening a buckle near my shoulder. His fingers brushed my collarbone. For a second, I froze. "Yeah," I murmured, not meeting his eyes. "I'm good." It was just a touch, but it lingered longer than it should have long after we started walking. Long after the trail narrowed, trees thickened, and silence became comfortable again. Deep down, I think I knew this hike wouldn't just take us into the woods. It would take me somewhere I hadn't dared to go with him before, and I wasn't sure I was ready. We'd been friends for almost 6 years, ever since a mandatory group project in our first-year psych class threw us together. Everyone else had swapped numbers and split the workload. Evan had naturally suggested we meet at the rec center with pizza and a whiteboard like we were pitching a startup, only I showed up. We finished the project on our own, and somehow never stopped hanging out. He was everything I wasn't. Easygoing, okay? Effortlessly charming. The kind of guy who made friends just by existing in a room. I was quieter, deliberate, a little guarded. He never minded. If anything, I think he liked pulling me out of my shell. "One dumb joke, one unexpected adventure at a time. This trail's nothing," he said as we crossed a narrow wooden footbridge over a stream. When I hiked the Adirondacks last fall, I had to practically drag my cousin up a ridge. Dude ate 3 Pop-Tarts and thought he was invincible. "Sounds familiar," I said. "Except you've upgraded from Pop-Tarts to Cliff Bars. So clearly, you've matured." "Only the finest cuisine for us today, my friend," he grinned. The trail climbed steadily, weaving between mossy boulders and clusters of birch. Shafts of sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling his back as he walked ahead of me. Every so often, he glanced over his shoulder to make sure I was keeping up. I always was. I just liked watching him from behind, his easy stride. The way he swung his arms when telling a story, it was hypnotic. "You remember that camping trip senior year?" he asked, slowing so we walked side by side. I snorted. "When Jordan fell asleep with his shoes on the fire pit? You mean when you dared him to see how close he could get to the coals without burning them?" "Details," he said, waving a hand. It was a bonding experience. Besides, the guy learned a valuable lesson about rubber soles. Being around him felt effortless. We'd spent so much time in each other's lives that the space between us felt natural, safe. except when it didn't. Except when he'd casually lean closer to show me something on his phone and I'd stop breathing. Or when he slung an arm around my shoulder during group photos and I had to fight the urge to lean in. I wasn't sure when it changed, when I stopped just admiring him and started wanting more. Maybe it had always been there, quietly simmering under every joke, every late-night text. Or maybe I'd just been in denial. About halfway up the trail, we paused at a small clearing. Evan dropped his pack and stretched, arms lifting over his head with a groan. His shirt rode up just enough to reveal a strip of skin above his waistband, tan stupidly distracting. I looked away, suddenly very interested in my water bottle. "You good?" he asked, nudging my boot with his. "Yeah," I said, maybe a little too fast. "Just taking it in," he smiled, turning to face the view. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, the sun catching the edges of the trees like fire. "It's peaceful up here," he murmured. "Kind of makes you forget everything." "Yeah," I said, softer this time. "It does." We hiked another hour before reaching the Lientu, a simple wooden structure perched near a ridge overlooking the valley. Rustic but dry, the only problem was immediately obvious. One sleeping platform. "Guess we're getting cozy tonight," Evan said, tossing his pack down. He didn't hesitate, but my stomach flipped anyway. I had my sleeping bag. He had his butt. The space was tight. Maybe a two-person setup if you didn't mind brushing against each other all night. He met my eyes and smirked. "Unless you're scared, I snore." I shook my head, forcing a casual laugh. "Only if you start sleepwalking again." I still haven't recovered from that story. "In your dreams?" That earned a full laugh from him, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. And yet, when his gaze lingered just a second too long on mine, something shifted. Something quiet, heavy in the air. Then he looked away, busying himself with unrolling his gear. But that glance, it stayed with me, nestled somewhere in my chest, blooming slow and quiet. It's like something waiting to be named. We hadn't even finished setting up when the sky began to turn. I noticed first a hush falling over the woods like nature was holding its breath. The leaves stilled, birds quieted, then a low rumble echoed in the distance. I looked up to see clouds darkening fast across the horizon. "Wasn't supposed to rain today," Evan said, squinting. "Mountain weather," I replied, tightening the tarp line over the Lientu. Change comes fast. We worked quickly, securing our gear under the overhang and moving our packs out of reach of the inevitable downpour. Just as the last knot was tied, the first drops hit fat, cold splashes against my skin. Within seconds, it turned into a full-on downpour. Rain hammered the wooden roof, turning the trail outside into a muddy stream. "Well," Evan said, shaking water from his hair as he ducked into the shelter, "guess we're stuck here for a while."
Oh.
The Lientu was deep enough to keep the rain off us, but the open front let in gusts of wind that carried the cold straight inside. I shivered slightly, rubbing my arms as I sat cross-legged on my sleeping bag. Evan flopped down beside me, stretching out on his side, head propped on one arm. "You cold?" "I'm fine." "You're lying," he said, grinning. "I can see your goosebumps from here." Before I could answer, he scooted closer and draped his sleeping bag over both of us. It's warm. Not from the fabric, but from the fact that he was now inches from me. His shoulder brushed mine. I could feel the heat of him through our jackets. His scent pine, sweat, something faintly citrusy lingered around me like smoke. I held perfectly still, focusing on anything other than the fact that Evan was touching me willingly, comfortably, as if it were no big deal. "You always tense up like that when you're cozy with a friend?" he teased. "I'm not tense," I lied. He smirked, unconvinced. "You're stiff as a rock." "Relax, man. I don't bite." If only he did. Maybe then this would be easier to manage. He shifted again. Lying flat now, one arm behind his head, the other resting dangerously close to mine. So close I could feel the warmth radiating from his fingers. My heart thudded hard in my chest. Every casual touch unraveled me a little more. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to blurt it all out, how I couldn't stop thinking about the way he smiled, how his voice dipped when he got serious, or how I sometimes caught myself staring too long when he wasn't looking. But I didn't. If I said it, everything would change, and I wasn't sure I was brave enough to risk losing him. Instead, I turned slightly toward him. You ever think about stuff like this? I asked quietly. He looked over, brow furrowed. Stuff like what? Being out here, away from everything, makes you think differently, doesn't it? He was quiet for a moment. Rain drummed steadily above us. Yeah, he said finally, his voice softer, thoughtful. It does. Out here, there's no pressure, no one watching, just you. And whatever you've been trying not to think about. I swallowed. Exactly. He rolled onto his side to face me, head resting on his arm. So close now, I could see thefts of green in his hazel eyes. His gaze searched mine, like he was trying to read something hidden. What have you been trying not to think about? He asked. I looked at him, and for a split second, I almost said it. Almost gave in. Almost said you. Every time he touched me like it meant something. But instead, I said nothing. He studied me a beat longer, and I thought, maybe just maybe he saw through it. Then he reached out and gently flicked my forehead. Liar. I laughed, more out of nerves than amusement. Takes one to know one, he teased, his expression softening. Something passed between us unspoken, fragile, the kind of thing that would vanish if you tried too hard to name it. Thunder rolled again, you know, said voice low. I used to wonder if you were into me. What? He shrugged, suddenly shy. I mean little things. The way you looked at me sometimes. The way you got all awkward when I sat too close. I figured, maybe. But I didn't want to push. I stared at him, mouth dry. And now, I whispered. Evan's eyes didn't leave mine. Now I'm not wondering as much. My heart slammed against my ribs. It felt like the ground shifted under us, not in a terrifying way, but like a cliff, giving just enough to reveal something beneath, something waiting. Neither of us moved, but the space between us no longer felt safe. It felt electric. The rain didn't ease for hours. The sky had gone completely dark, and all that separated us from the cold night was the sleeping bag draped over our shoulders and the dim, orange glow of the lantern beside us. We hadn't said much since Evan's comment. Now I'm not wondering as much. His words circled my thoughts like embers refusing to die. Every time I thought I'd settled, the memory sparked again, lighting my chest with something too dangerous to name. He was still lying beside me, arms folded behind his head, staring up at the wooden ceiling like the knots in the planks held answers. His knee brushed mine whenever he shifted. Each time I told myself it meant nothing, but the way his foot lingered by mine now, it meant something. I swallowed, mouth dry from the silence and everything I wasn't saying. I couldn't keep pretending. Not after that look he gave me. Not after what he said. I turned toward him. Evan. He looked over immediately, like he'd been waiting for me to speak. Yeah, my throat tightened. The words stuck somewhere between my lungs and my tongue. My heart beat so hard I was sure he could hear it. I've been thinking about what you said, I murmured. About. You said you used to wonder if I was into you. He didn't respond at first, just held my gaze. My voice shook, but I pushed forward. I am. I didn't want to mess up what we have, but I trailed off, hating how fragile I sounded. It's been killing me. Evan sat up slowly, one knee bent, arms resting on it. He didn't interrupt, he just listened. I kept going, voice low, but steady. You don't know what it's like. Wanting to be close to someone who doesn't even realize they're pulling you in every time they laugh. Or smile, or touch your arm like it's nothing. I told myself it would pass that, it was a phase or admiration or whatever, but it didn't. It just got worse. There it was. Laid bare between us like a wound, silence settled over us, thick and unmoving. When I finally looked up, Evan stared back with an expression I couldn't read. Not shocked, not upset something else. He exhaled slowly. Why didn't you tell me? I was scared. Of what? I let out a quiet, hollow laugh. That you'd stop looking at me the same way. That I'd ruin the one thing in my life that made me feel like I actually belonged somewhere. Evan's jaw tensed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like he needed to physically brace himself. I think I knew, he said quietly, or part of me did, but I didn't want to face it. Why not? He hesitated. Because I didn't want to question what that said about me. I blinked. Wait. Are you saying I don't know what I'm saying? He admitted, voice rough. I've never thought of myself as anything other than straight. But then you'd laugh at one of my dumb jokes, and I'd think about how good it felt to make you smile. Or you'd fall asleep in the car on some road trip. And I'd catch myself glancing at you too long, wondering why it felt right. My chest tightened. Evan ran a hand through his hair. I kept brushing it off. Told myself it was just how close we were, that it didn't mean anything. He looked at me again. He looked at me again. But lately, I'm not so sure anymore. The wind rattled the trees outside, but I barely heard it over the pounding in my ears. He leaned toward me slightly, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. You scare me, he said. I flinched, but he shook his head quickly. No, I mean, you make me feel things I've never had to name before, and I don't know what that makes me. But I know I don't want to lose you. I stared at him, barely breathing. The lantern cast soft shadows across his face, highlighting the vulnerability in his eyes. This wasn't teasing. This wasn't curiosity. This was real. You're not going to lose me, I whispered. I don't know what I'm doing, he said quietly. You don't have to, I replied. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just needed you to know. I started to lie back down to give him space to think, but before I could, his hand shot out and grabbed mine. Wait, he said, his fingers threading through mine. I froze. I don't want to pretend I don't feel something when I do, he said, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at him. His face was closer than before, eyes wide, searching, scared, but sure. Can I? His voice was barely audible. Can I kiss you? I didn't trust my voice. I just nodded, slowly, carefully. He leaned in. His hand came up to cup the side of my jaw, warm and tentative. He paused just before our lips touched, giving me one last chance to pull away. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, soft at first, uncertain, then again firmer, more intentional. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me gently closer. Slow and exploratory, like we were discovering something neither of us had planned to find when we pulled apart. His forehead rested against mine, both of us breathless. That wasn't nothing, he murmured. No, I whispered, heart finally settling into something like peace. It really wasn't. We lay in silence after that kiss. Not awkward, not tense quiet in a way that felt right, like we'd finally let the truth exhale after holding it in too long. Evan still held my hand, fingers tracing mine lazily. Every few minutes he'd glance at me and I'd catch him smiling as if he wasn't sure this was real. You good? I asked softly. He nodded. Yeah, I can't believe I kissed you. Same, I chuckled. Honestly, part of me thought you'd run off into the woods screaming, he snorted, nudging me with his shoulder. That would have been dramatic even for me. Fair. I laughed, and his eyes softened. He shifted onto his side to face me fully, propping his head on one arm. I meant what I said, he said, more serious now. This isn't just some moment. I'm still figuring it out. Yeah, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. I wouldn't ask you to. He studied me a moment, thumb brushing the back of my hand. So, what does this mean for us? That we talk. Figure it out, one step at a time, I said. No pressure, no rush. Evan looked relieved. Good, because my brain's kind of spinning, like I want to lean over and kiss you again. But I'm also terrified of messing everything up. You kind of already kissed me, I teased. Right, but now I know I like it, he smirked. So it's more dangerous. I laughed and he leaned in to press a quick kiss to my temple. Soft, warm, so unlike anything before. I froze, not from fear, but from the intimacy, like something couples do without thinking. And maybe that's where we're heading. He admitted. We don't have to call it anything yet, I said. But I want to eventually, he whispered. I don't want to hide this. Not for myself. Not from you. Something swelled in my chest. Hope, maybe, or the echo of something deeper that had waited years for this. I'm here, I said, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. I've been here. He closed his eyes briefly at my touch, exhaling slowly. I always felt safe with you, even when I didn't know why. Maybe now you do. I think I'm starting to. For a while we didn't talk. We just lay there, pressed shoulder, shoulder, watching shadows shift across the Leonto roof. His hand stayed in mine, and when I shifted slightly, he tucked his arm around me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eventually he asked, "Do you think this changes everything?" "Maybe," I murmured. "But maybe that's not a bad thing," he said softly, thoughtful. "If we survived that god-awful hill climb earlier, we can probably survive feelings too." "Wow, so romantic," I teased. "I try," he said. I turned to him again, our smiles meeting in the dark. "We'll figure it out together." "Yeah, together." When he kissed me again, gentle and unhurried, it felt like he wanted to memorize the shape of this new chapter. I let myself believe it wasn't just the end of something old. It was the start of something real. By morning, the fire had burned out, but I didn't feel cold. Evan was still curled beside me, arm thrown loosely over my waist, breath warm against my neck. At some point during the night, we'd shifted closer. No awkwardness, no second-guessing, just quiet comfort. Birdsong filtered through the trees. A soft breeze brushing the canvas opening of the Leonto. Everything smelled like pine, dew, and possibility. I moved slowly, careful not to wake him. My hand slipped beneath the blanket, and his found mine. "Hey," he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. "Where are you going?" "Just stretching," I whispered, squeezing his hand. His eyes opened halfway, smiling, sleepy, soft, utterly unguarded. "You stayed?" "I did. Did you think I wouldn't?" "Part of me thought you'd wake up, realize last night was a mistake, and bolt." I leaned in, brushing my forehead against his. Not even tempted, he grinned on then, without thinking. Brought my knuckles to his lips. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt like a promise. Eventually we packed up camp. Neither of us said much, but the silence was easy, warm, different from before. When I bent to roll up the sleeping bags, Evan nudged me with his shoulder. "Hey, I've been thinking, yeah. Would it be totally cheesy if we came back here someday?" His voice was shy, hopeful. "Same spot." "I asked you and me," he said. I couldn't help smiling. "You planning an anniversary already?" He flushed, laughing. "Too soon? Maybe. But I kind of love it. I know we're just starting." "Whatever this is," he said softly, "but last night felt real. I want to keep feeling like that with you." I stepped closer and tugged on his hoodie string. "Then you will," I said. We made our way down the trail, our packs somehow feeling lighter, even though they weren't. The air was crisp, golden sunlight filtering through the trees, dancing along the path. Somewhere behind us, the Leonto waited in silence, holding the night we first became more than friends. Halfway down, Evan reached for my hand. Just like that. No words, no hesitation. I let him. We didn't say much after that, just walked, fingers intertwined, steps in perfect sync. But every so often, I'd catch him glancing at me from the corner of his eye, like he still couldn't believe any of this was real. Near the bottom of the hill, he tugged my hand to stop me. "One more thing," he said. Curious, I turned to him. He pulled out his phone, flipped to the selfie camera, and held it up between us. "We never got a picture," he said. I blinked. "You want to? Document this? Us in flannel and 5-day stubble." "Yes," he said, eyes serious. "Because I want to remember it. This exact moment before the world creeps back in." I leaned into him, letting our heads touch. "Then take it." The shutter clicked. He looked at the photo for a second, then smiled and whispered, "New favorite." I didn't need to ask why. I already knew. We kept walking, the world slowly opening up beyond the trees. There'd be questions ahead, doubts, maybe even mistakes. But as we stepped into the sunlight hand in hand, I wasn't afraid. For the first time, we weren't just hiking a trail. We were walking into something new dashed together. We reached the bottom of the trail, sunlight warming our faces, the forest behind us fading into quiet. Our fingers were still intertwined. A simple touch that carried everything we had in Sedan, everything we had. Somewhere back at the Liantu, the memories of that night lingered, like a secret tucked into the trees. But ahead of us, the world waited, full of possibilities. Questions, doubts, mistakes they might come. Maybe they would, but for now, none of that mattered. We walked on together, side by side, hearts a little lighter, steps in sync. And for the first time, I didn't just feel like I was hiking a trail. I felt like I was stepping into something new, something real, something ours, and with him beside me, I knew I was ready.